Busy day for you. Can I just confirm, are you ruling out taxes going up in the autumn?
Well, what we set out today is spending plans which are a consequence of the tough decisions we made on tax last autumn, in the autumn budget in 2024. And the reason that we had to take those tough decisions to raise taxes on businesses and others was because of the inheritance from the previous Tory government, a big, as you know, fiscal black hole, 22 billion, and also... yes, indeed, I know that, but that's... we very much, when we discovered the books, we were shocked about what was in there, and a stagnating economy and public services on their knees. So the spending review is in line with the allocation of the envelope, if you see what I mean, of the budget and also the spring statement. And what we're doing today is we are setting out what the government's priorities are, which are very much in line with the manifesto we put to the British people in July, investing record amounts in the NHS, investing in our schools, investing in infrastructure, investing in defence, keeping our country safe. So that's what we're doing today. We've got the fastest growing economy in the G7 in the first quarter of this year, but we're not making tax announcements today.
Well, that's because countries like Japan and the US are going backwards. But the question was, are we going to see tax rises? Because, we've had the good news, well, the attempt at a good news story by the Chancellor today. The question that a lot of people are asking is, are you going to have to come back on tax rises?
Well, we're not going to write this autumn's budget.
Are you ruling it
now?
out, though?
Well, as I say, we are not going to write this autumn's budget now, but we have £9 billion
so you're not ruling it out?
Of fiscal... Well, I'm not ruling it in, I'm not ruling it out. We have got £9 billion of fiscal headroom, which is significantly more than the Tories had when they were in power at the end of their time in power. We've got a growing economy, and we, as the Chancellor did say in the Chamber, the budget in the autumn last year was a once-in-a-generation budget where we had to do some very tough things, and we're not going to have another budget like that in the future.
The reason I ask is because Paul Judson, who does know a lot about the economy of the IFS, has said that she is meeting her fiscal rules by the most minuscule of margins, and that any negative news on economic forecasts, and we've all seen how unpredictable the global economy can be, will mean that she will have to find more money, probably through tax rises.
Well,
is he wrong?
Well, the OBR said when we did our spring statement that we were going to meet both fiscal rules early in the period. So, look, things change, the world changes, we have to react to that.
But, growth forecasts have got worse. Well, debt has gone up.
Some of them have and some of them haven't. So the IMF has revised
But, you're crossing your figures and hoping for the best here.
Well, look, we can't control global markets, and I'm in charge of financial services policy. We can't control everything that happens in the world. No government can. And, of course, we have to react to events when events do happen. But we've got strong economic fundamentals, real-term wages. Wages have been rising faster in the first 10 months of our government than the first 10 years of the last Conservative government. We've had 4 interest rate cuts. We've got the strongest growth in the G7 in the first quarter of this year. So
Paul Johnson says the fiscal situation is less good now than it was last summer. Is he wrong?
Well, we, as a government, went to the British people and promised them change. And, of course, that requires investment and reform of our public services. So we, as set out today, are going to be spending 2.3% more in governmental spending. And we have, as you know, from what the Chancellor has said, carved out room in the fiscal rules to ensure that we can invest to grow the economy. And that is in the long-term interests of the country, which will mean that the economy will grow more quickly and will get more money into people's pockets. And part of our plan for change is raising living standard. That's what growth is all about. It's not about lines on a chart, which don't mean much to people.
I guess, what I'm asking is, you're banking on growth, and Harold Wilson once said, I'm an optimist, but an optimist that's got a raincoat. Does Rachel Reeves, do you have a raincoat?
Well, we're banking on growth because all the policies that we're putting in place, including the huge planning reforms that were scored by the OBR, the biggest non-fiscal lever for growth that the OBR has scored. We've already set those planning reforms out in December. Those were the ones that aren't in the bill that we're taking through. So there are other ways to create growth in the economy, create the right conditions for growth, other than tax and spend. And the planning reforms that we're putting through are one of those, and also making sure that our regulators, which I'm doing as in charge of financial services, are really doubling down on growth and ensuring that we kickstart the economy and get businesses investing.
So as a result of all this, can you make some guarantees? You talk about houses. You're guaranteeing those 1.5 million houses.
We have promised 1.5 million. The announcement today of 39 billion in affordable homes over a period of 10 years is a huge commitment from the government in affordable homes. But we're also putting through those planning reforms through Parliament to ensure that house builders are not land banking, that they are building the homes that we need. And I'm also working with the Financial Conduct Authority to ensure that the rules around mortgage lending are proportionate and fair so that we have more first-time buyers in the market.
Who are the losers today?
In every spending review, there are some departments who receive better increases than others, let's put it like that. Some of the lines on the graph, there's a story behind them. So, for example, let's take transport. One of the reasons that the transport budget doesn't look quite so good is that actually the rail subsidy that we need at the moment isn't as high as it was during COVID times because there are more people travelling in on the trains. There's a story behind all of this. The FCDO...
What about the Home Office? Real terms cut of 1.4% a year.
The Home Office, yeah, but the policing was separated out, if you look at the graph. So there's a 2.3% real terms increase in the policing budget. The rest of the budget that you're talking about is because we have set out today that we are going to stop using hotels, which are extremely expensive for asylum seekers. We're going to bear down on the cost of that. We're going to accelerate the asylum seeking process. So we've announced £200 million as part of a transformation fund to get through that backlog and to speed that process up so that people who don't have the right to be here are deported more quickly and that those who do have the right to be here stay and start to contribute.
One of your big pledges was around violence against women and girls, and the CEO of Refuge today has said that a critical opportunity has missed. There's a £307 million shortfall in spending on violence against women and girls.
Well, the Home Secretary will set out in more detail how they're going to spend the settlement that we've announced today. But the government, from the Home Secretary to Jess Phillips to myself to the Prime Minister, really, really passionate about the pledge that we made in the manifesto to halve the levels of violence against women.
And that's still the pledge?
That is still the pledge, indeed.
And so what do you make of her words?
Well, you'll forgive me, but there are so many different layers to this. And as I've said, the Home Secretary will set out in more detail the different elements of her settlement in the weeks to come.
One of the big winners is health. Can you guarantee that when you get the reform plans that we're expecting soon, Wes Streeting is not going to come back asking for more money?
Well, this is a record level of investment in the health service. We prioritised this at the election. This is not something that should be a surprise to anyone.
Is this it, this 30 billion odd?
Well, it's it for the spending review period, and we are intent on continuing to bring down waiting lists. That's a specific promise we made to the British people. We know that people were waiting too long, far too long for operations, which is bad for them. It's also bad for productivity. It's bad for our economy.
So with this money, that is still very much the commitment, cut waiting list by 18 weeks by the end of Parliament?
Yeah,
okay.
2 18 weeks, yeah.
And last question, Mel Stride has said, when the going gets tough, the Chancellor blinks. Is that right? When it comes to the winter fuel U-turn and we're expecting watering down on welfare reform on the two-child benefit cap. Is that right?
I found his whole approach just not very believable. It didn't ring true to me. The Chancellor has had to take some really, really tough decisions because of the inheritance from his from the previous government that he was a full member of and was in charge of work and pensions for quite some time, and I used to be in that department. It's right that now that the economy is growing more rapidly, that we look again at winter fuel payment. We're still means testing it because the wealthiest people in this country don't need £200 or £300 a year, depending on their age, to help pay their fuel bills. We've set the threshold now obviously much higher because we listened to the feedback. We knew that there were big concerns. But one of the things that Mel Stride isn't serious about is the triple lock, which is worth a lot more year on year than the winter fuel payment. So it's right that we have rebalanced our approach there. But I wouldn't have said that anyone thinks that Rachel Reeves isn't tough.
OK, Emma Reynolds, you've had a really busy week. I think this is your last interview of the day, is that right?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking to us.